Hello and welcome to Martin's Farm on the Farmgate podcast channel. I'm Finlo Costain, the editor of 8.9.com.
And I'm Martin Lyons, the Chief Executive of the Nature Friendly Farming Network.
And in this series, we're finding out about what's happening month by month on Martin's Farm, which is Patley Grove Farm in St Neots in Cambridgeshire, as well as meeting key staff and farmers from within the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Today, we're going to find out what November looks like on the farm. And now that the UK party conference season has finished, we're going to get Martin's thoughts on the party positions. We're also joined by Ifan Davies, who farms with his daughter at Carreg-y-Bîg and is the Sustainable Farming Officer for the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Hi, Ifan. Have I said the name of your farm correctly there?
You have. I was just thinking how impressed I was with it. Thank you very much, Finlo.
Excellent. I had to Google it. I had to make sure I was getting the pronunciation, and I've got it written out in front of me in phonetics. But anyway, it was almost right, so that's good. Now, I mentioned that you farm with your daughter, and that's something, that's talked about on various different websites, your daughter, Rhiannon. Tell me a bit about that relationship, because speaking as a father, I confess it's not always easy to get kids out working when it's wet and cold.
No, but she has always been very willing, I must say. The whole family are always willing to help out when necessary, but Rhiannon would be by my side since she was very young, and by my father's side before we actually moved here. She used to spend a lot of time with her grandfather out on the farm. She has stepped back slightly this year to concentrate more on her GCSEs, but luckily her eldest sister is back from New Zealand, so the labour is still there. The slave labour is still going on well at home.
Fantastic. And I'm aware that she does quite a bit on social media, or has done. Which are the channels that you've found or that she's found work best?
Well, she had a very successful but brief stint with TikTok. It was the right gap for her age group to post on. But she got quite a lot of unwanted attention when she got popular videos, and she had to remove herself from that channel. But I think her first video up on TikTok came to 15,000 views.
Right, really, that's quite remarkable, isn't it? And as you say, it's such a shame, isn't it, when all you're trying to do is sort of explain the things that you're doing, and then you, as you say, you get that unwarranted attention. And these days, being able to communicate through social media has become so important, for particularly for farmers that are sort of selling outside of those more traditional kind of contract-based supply chains, trying to do more stuff at an independent level.
Yes, definitely. And she was having such good feedback from people as well. It was really fantastic. It was very gentle and just explaining a bit about day-to-day life. There was nothing too pushy. She didn't have an agenda to sell. She was just merely trying to explain what was going on. It was just the unwanted attention became too much hard work, really, to keep on top of.
Yeah, it's really difficult, and it's very difficult as well to sort of separate yourself, I suppose, from, being that individual person who is getting the abuse or that sort of unwanted attention targeted at you, and then to kind of understand yourself as almost as a product, really, within social media, and to use social media in order to get messages across, but then be, I guess, strong enough to be able to sort of differentiate that stuff that you really don't want, that is unwarranted, and just put it to one side. And that must be an incredibly difficult balancing act for everybody, but particularly for young women involved in social media and farming.
Yeah, I mean, she was only 13 when she tried to post on TikTok and then had to remove herself. So it was quite difficult. It's quite difficult for most teenage girls anyway, without the extra hassles of life. So yeah, it was difficult, but it just got to a stage where we were spending an hour every night going through removing people, and it became the enjoyment was taken away from it, so we just stopped doing it.
I'm really sorry to hear that, and it wasn't something that I knew before we were having this conversation as well, so I might have hesitated to bring it up, but I think actually it's really important to talk about these things and to just flag up the difficulties around social media for farmers. And just, I mean, obviously that's sort of a fascinating sort of area, thinking in terms of the way that you farm, not just with your family, but it was quite particularly with your daughter there. But we'll be coming back to you a bit later in the programme to find out more about your life there on Carreg-y-Bîg and to dip into Welsh farming policy more broadly. But now, as usual, let's start instantly. It's with Martin. And Martin, it's about to be November. What does that mean? What are you doing in November? What's happening on the farm? And what are other people doing around you?
So heading into November, for us, we've had a really dry autumn. We haven't finished all our drilling. This week is while we're currently recording this, is showing some rain. We hoped next week, the week after, beginning of November, getting to finish planting the rest of our crops that we've waited for the moisture to come to germinate the weeds. We've been really keen to sort of, where possible, delay that planting to encourage the weeds to germinate and to grow, so we can kill them before we plant our crops. So that's the crops that we have planted. We'll be looking out for what weeds may be coming up. And as a non-organic farmer, we will look to use some herbicides to manage some of those weed problems, particularly the ones that can take most of the yield from us later on in the year as those crops go forward. And then once all the planting of our crops are done, it's a case of get the pressure washer out, get your waterproofs on, and get everything cleaned down, ready, greased, put in the sheds, and then start the maintenance program of fixing anything that's gone wrong over this summer period, but also getting wrapped up for winter, lagging water pipes, checking antifreeze in tractors and machinery, sort of do it before the frosts come so we can be pre-ready. There's nothing worse than on a Saturday night suddenly a -4 gets forecast and you're running around trying to wrap up that water pipe or checking the tractor's got an antifreeze top up been placed in it. And then we sort of kind of wind down as the days get shorter. As an arable farmer, our days can get shorter, and we sort of get into that maintenance and prep for winter, really, and get ready for the new year. And then when we look at my neighbours, many
just before you go into your neighbours, Martin, I'm just sort of wondering about that kind of winter period, as you say. The clocks are about to change. The days are going to be, a lot shorter, or sort of feel a lot shorter. Is there a kind of a sense of hibernation where, the work that you're doing, where you're spending a bit less time working than you would be in those long days in the summertime, or are you simply taking advantage of the daylight when it's there, but then moving into sheds and doing a lot of maintenance and other things during the darker times?
There is very much feels like hibernation because the days get shorter. We're not doing overtime, not having to do long days. We've got no livestock that we own on the farm. We've got other people's, they can look after those. But yeah, that kind of getting some jobs in that we can do in the shed that early morning and late afternoon, where it's the nights, the days and the nights are drawing in. And also we can get the heater on if it's cold. But it also tends to mean we end up doing a lot more of the paperwork, the planning, the budgets, the filling in forms, and sort of those grotty wet days we haven't got to be outside. So it's retreat to the office and try and get caught up with the paperwork.
It's a remarkable job, really, isn't it, farming? I think a lot of people just don't quite get that sense of how multifaceted the job is. And that, for a lot of people, they say they're a jack of all trades and a master of none. But frankly, you've got to be quite a master of a lot of different trades, haven't you, in the farming industry?
The role of the farmer has expanded so much. We're managing the soil, we're thinking about crops planting, the husbandry of those crops, how healthy they are, what varieties to grow, what market they need to go, and then how do we sell our grain? Do we sell it today? Do we set market for the future? Do we sell next year's grain before we even plant it? So we're having to do budgets on cash flow, but also in market demands. So I'm looking at what the weather impacts and the markets are globally happening to forecast cash flow and what we can sell. Then also what we buy. We're buying some fertilizers and some other inputs. Do I buy today? Do I buy next year? Next week? Next year? The fertilizer we brought back in September has already gone up £40 a tonne. So I've done a good sale there because the market's gone up. But there's always the risk, and this is the thing with farming, prices will go up and down. And if it had gone down £40, I'd have spent a lot of money on something I could have saved on. And this is that risk balance we are having to juggle now of weather impacts, market impacts, government support payments or outcome payments. It is becoming a real juggle of needing to be a multi-skilled technical business operator to juggle all these things together, where the demand of the day job of literally getting on with the job needs to come first many days.
And as you sort of run through some of those things that you're doing, I've kind of written down that you're a futures trader, a farmer, sort of, and soil expert, that you're a mechanic, an accountant, and of course you're doing the marketing as well. So that, loads of different areas there, and not to mention biodiversity and understanding water movement and all those other kinds of things. But I was talking earlier on there with Ifan about Rhiannon, and obviously she was 13 when she was on social media trying to promote what she was doing. But Martin, as the chief executive of Nature Friendly Farming Network, you are obviously out there quite a lot on social media as well. You're out there being quoted in the media, in the press. And I just wonder, I mean, you're not 13 and you're definitely over 30. I wouldn't like to sort of be more specific than that, although I think you have just had a birthday, so happy birthday. And so I'm just wondering how you juggle that and whether you've had a similar experience, obviously as an older person, where you're getting lots of flack from people that you feel duty bound to respond to as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I use social media in different levels, and I'm also conscious that I'm dyslexic, so my typing and response comes across differently and misspelt sometimes, or comes across not in the way I meant it to say it. But wait, so I used to use Twitter, X, quite a bit. That platform for me is not a nice space to be, so we've come off that one. I use other platforms. But quite often I get direct messages from farmers, from other people. I'm out and about a lot. Some of it's quite bluntly, quite nasty, quite aggressive. And I'm someone who wants to have a conversation to people. If someone thinks my position or my thinking is wrong, I'll demonstrate through social media. This is why I reference this paper, this action. But also, let's talk. My farm's always open. I'm welcome people here. I go out and about a lot, because the best way we can talk about these different positions is through dialogue. I find social media, it's given me a lot of heartache and headache, and certainly for my wider family members, they get upset with some of the messages they see come into me through social media or letters, emails, and other things. I kind of have to grow a bit of a thick skin to it sometimes, but it does sit in you sometimes, particularly if I've come across and I haven't represented myself in the way I want to get across.
Yeah, it's always difficult, isn't it? Because it's easy to say something, particularly in a text or something like that, where there isn't nuance, where people don't have your tone of voice and they don't have, your facial expression along with it. And something that seems entirely anodyne can be, cause offence and then create the most incredible reaction. Do you control all of your own? Because obviously, you're the head of a pretty substantial non-governmental organisation. Do you control your own media channels, or do you have other people sort of chipping in and helping with that as well?
I do most of it myself. I have someone who helps with Ellie with my emails and diary and bits. That if I'm trying to get something across that's nuanced, I'll get help to make sure the spelling and it's right, because I don't want it to come across wrong, because I'm a head of an organisation and there's that corporate responsibility. But majority of it is me posting. It's me, and I could do a lot more, but it's time. I would like to do more, because there's so much what I get up to. I think it's really interesting for other people to see and hear, and my reflections. And I use LinkedIn a little more now, and I've started doing short videos on there with reflections from party conferences or a major event, so people can hear my voice and my tone rather than just what I write.
Yeah, and actually, I was just thinking about the way in which, you know, you were talking about typing and being dyslexic. I'm not dyslexic, but I am short-sighted, and if I've got my contact lenses in, I really can't see a thing unless I'm holding the phone a very long way away from me. So if I haven't got my reading glasses, then who knows what I'm typing? And often I'll try and use that sort of audio function where you're sort of dictating, but that often is even worse, and it gets some really stupid things in there.
I use that voice dictation quite a lot in lots of what I do. And yeah, you post something and then I'll get a message from a friend or from a wife or someone and sort of, you need to go and edit that. That doesn't mean, or that word isn't what you, words that mean the same but spelled differently. So I've used the wrong one in the wrong context. Some platforms you can edit, others you can't. But that's me. I'm not perfect. I have these challenges, and as many other people do. So I try and be more honest about who and what I am now, rather than not post and hide from it.
And you were talking there about doing those sort of pieces to camera, which I think are really helpful, as you say, because they allow that nuance to come through. But also, I know that an awful lot of farmers use the on WhatsApp, where you can send a voice message instead, and that's something that's quite interesting, that's used across the developing world, where there's a lot of illiteracy, people can't write, and so WhatsApp's become really important for sharing messages between farmers in some of those countries where illiteracy is quite high, because people are able to share those voice messages, which is just an aside, but I find it really interesting. I just wanted to go back to you were telling us about your farm. You mentioned keying in the weeds, and I wonder if you could just explain what that means. And also, I get the impression with your cover crops that those cover crops are then going to be for want of a better word, mixed into the soil. So if you could just sort of talk us through that phase and why that happens.
Yeah, so after harvest, we always plant majority of our soils with what we call a cover crop or catch crop, because we don't like to leave bare soil. Sometimes we do a bit of cultivation, so there's not the opportunity. So when we come into planting our crops at sort of the last month and this time of year, sometimes there's that cover crop, so that needs to be terminated. We try not to move the soil, so we plant our seeds direct into that soil. So that means we have to use a herbicide, and quite often, currently, that's Roundup to kill those weeds. But also we can use herbicides that I can place on the soil surface, and it becomes like a weed barrier. And so weeds that come up in the next month will get terminated. But we're constantly trying to move away from pesticides or from herbicides. But there's this balance of, do I move lots of soil and burn diesel and oxidize the soil to cultivate the weeds, or do I put a herbicide on? And for me, that's trying to get this balance of use as little as possible, but leave the best conditions as possible. But also, where we're not planting this autumn, that cover crop can carry on growing right through the winter. And what we found the winter before last, when it was really wet, because we hadn't got bare soil, we'd got a cover crop or catch crop, a green manure on the ground. It was so wet we couldn't plant, but that protected the soil until it was in good enough condition I could plant. If I'd have done a lot of cultivation, it'd have been a bare soil, and it may have lost the nutrients and the sediment away from the field. So as a farmer, there's always this balance of what's best.
And just very quickly, if you could just talk us through what other farmers around you are doing before we quickly whip on to the party conferences, Martin.
Yeah, so many of them have done all their planting, putting machines in the shed. Many of them are out there doing the hedge cutting and ditch maintenance. We do our hedge cutting up preferably after Christmas, once all the berries have come off. So other farmers are sort of further ahead. But I've also watched in a lot of them that have drilled in dry soils. Their crops are struggling getting going because that moisture wasn't there. So they've got a very uneven crop coming through. And that would just mean more management going forward.
Thank you. Really good. Really good to hear all of that. And I know that we've spent a bit of time talking about social media, but I think that's important. It's been interesting. For me, hopefully it's interesting to those listening as well. Just moving on to the party conferences, Martin, I know you've been to at least 3 of them. And I wonder if you could sort of summarise the party positions for us. And you went to Labour, Conservatives and Lib Dems. Did you go to any of the others as well?
No, not this year. We went for the 3 main UK party conferences of political parties. Very interesting, I find, going to one after the other, the different politics, perspectives and memberships that are in each one. So you get to engage at different levels. For the Labour and the Lib Dems, a lot of focus on climate, nature, resilience. With Labour, I always find a bit of a junch with the talking about planning bills and nature being an inconvenience to growth. Well, nature underpins our economy, so how does that work? But the rhetoric, the language is right. It's just the delivery. And then we went to the Conservatives one where there was talking around stepping back from the Climate Act and other things, and sort of complaining about arm length bodies from government holding back growth. And it's this conjecture of different politics working together. So there's quite a mixed bag, but I'm always down to what are you actually doing? Rather than the rhetoric, what's your action? And we see that very differently across all those three main parties.
And just give people a sense of what a party conference is like, because I get the impression that the Conservative Party conference really will feel very different when you walk through the double doors of the exhibition centre to the Labour conference or the Lib Dem conference. What's the feeling at these things? Are they exciting places to be, or just actually deadly dull?
They're very busy places, and they've changed a lot as politics and elective parties have changed over the last few years. It's shifted. So you go to the Liberal Democrats, a diverse section of community and people. As a non-party affiliated person, I can go and sit in to listen to their members debating their policy. I find that fascinating. So there's stalls, stands going on, a lot of sponsored events and sessions and panel sessions, but you get to meet a whole range of different people. Labour, a lot bigger. That's particularly now it's in Liverpool. Lots of corporate sponsorships and events where panel sessions, roundtable discussions, bringing in different MPs, different ministers, opportunity to mingle, events and drinks receptions in the evenings to bring people together. So there's a great networking opportunity and very busy 4 days talking to people. Breakfast at 8, events sometimes don't finish till 10, 11 o'clock at night. The long days talking to people. And then you've got the Conservatives, very much more corporate, very much sponsored. This year, a lot smaller than the previous few years because they're an opposition party now. But as Labour, their members can go in and debate their policy. The Conservatives, I've never seen that really happen. They're sort of told what the thing is. If you're a Conservative member, how do you affect and engage with the policy during that conference season?
And obviously you're apolitical in the position that you're in, but I wonder if you're able to give us a sense, in a sort of slightly dispassionate way about which party platform you think is probably most attractive from a farming perspective.
So in non-political ways, I like some of the Liberal Democrats, agriculture, food paper, climate, nature stuff, kind of building resilience in landscapes. Opposition politics is easier because you're not delivering. Labour, the focus on climate and nature, I think, is positive, but it's about delivery, and particularly in England, farming schemes that I haven't actually got traction at the moment, and everything's opened and closed. And the Conservatives, they've done some really good stuff around the Climate Act, the Environment Act, the Agricultural Act in their previous. But they're now kind of turning that round again and saying, well, maybe that wasn't such a good stuff we're doing. We need to improve it, where they were the ones that put it in place. So I find that quite piece. So they're so diverse, those political parties. There's a bit of good in each of them. And what I would like to see is a bit of each pulled out and made something that delivers long-term outcome.
So as with many things, it's about trying to sort of say, let's not make this a political football. Let's actually just sit down together and try and have a creative, sensible conversation. We're going to come on to Wales later, but it'd be really interesting to sort of look at that in context of what's going on in England as well, because it strikes me, and this is a hostage to fortune because the scheme hasn't yet been delivered, but it seems to be a much more coherent scheme, and one that it would be easier for more farmers to support as they go forwards. And we'll see whether that's the case or not, and we'll have a chat with Ifan on that. I'm just wondering, before we move to Wales, about where disaffected farmers go, because I think there was a lot of disaffection with the Conservatives before the last election. Probably one of the highest votes for Labour from within the farming community at the last election. An awful lot of that support has died off. Is everyone going to the Lib Dems, or do you think that people are interested in Reform and the Greens as well?
I think it's quite open and mixed now. I think quite a few are moving towards the Lib Dems because they're trying to be a real more rural vote. Conservatives are trying to recapture that. Many people are disillusioned or very unhappy with Labour, particularly some of the budgetary decisions they've done, the scheme implementations. So there's a lot of unhappy farmers around with Labour Party. Some are being tempted by the rhetoric of reform around, going to get rid of this, and we're going to do this and make life so simple and that. And some are tempted by the Greens a little bit because they're actually those more environmentally minded and climate minded farmers are thinking, well, actually, that's the pathway. And that's something we haven't seen for, well, as much as I can remember, such diverse views from different parties where farmers, countryside people are spreading across them in very diverse ways. But what will that mean come to election? And we know Wales and Scotland have got their elections next May. The national UK election won't be till probably 2029. There's a long time till then. So what will politics look like, and where do we move to in the language? And it kind of goes back to the social media and the rhetoric we hear to the delivery we see. And I'm very much focused around the delivery and actions and outcomes rather than rhetoric and noise, because all that does is get people upset and angry and not be realistic of our climate is changing. That is already impacting our businesses, our weather. We need to focus around building resilience in our countryside and our landscape and our farms, and actions and language that drives money away from that is not the best for me. It's not the best outcome we need to see. We need to bring public and private finance into our landscapes for flooding, for nature, for food, for other things, rather than rhetoric that takes investment away.
I'm really interested in this sort of sense that an awful lot of farmers across the British Isles, and I imagine it's the same everywhere, because you've got this sort of connection with the land, that there is more of an association with more of a nationalist perspective, but that's sort of very much been within Scotland and Wales. More farmers within perhaps Plaid Cymru, more farmers, sort of supporting what the Scottish National Party have been doing traditionally. And I'm interested in whether there is a sort of a building of that sort of interest in nationalism within England as well. And you sort of talked about the way in which some people are being attracted towards reform. Obviously, that's one type of nationalism, but the Greens sort of have this sort of sense of kind of almost leftist or green nationalism as well. And certainly I was listening to an interview with Zach Balansky, the new leader, just last week, and when was he elected as leader? I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they gained 110,000 members or something in that time. That's a member a minute since he was elected, which is quite phenomenal. And I do get the impression that some of those at least are going to be nature-friendly farmers.
Yeah, and that's the diversity of political opportunity destinations now: left, right, centre, centre left, centre right. I find that quite extraordinary, really, in such a short period of time. That breadth has opened up, but it kind of goes back to the traditional parties not giving a clear enough offer to many people that they've gone off one side or the other. But what it really gets down to, but what are the policies or actions rather than just the words? Because what do they actually really stand for, and what can they deliver, rather than being an opposition party that can make noise knowing they're not going to have to do anything.
Ifan, let's go to Wales, and I'm interested in just sort of continuing briefly that conversation. And I kind of made that rash suggestion that lots of farmers might be quite supportive of Plaid. Is that the case? And are more people becoming more supportive of Plaid Cymru as more people turn away from traditional parties, which I think is happening in Wales just as it's happening elsewhere?
Well, I do think that in general voters have been disappointed by the current leadership. And they will likely be looking for other options. So I think that it is quite possible that Plaid Cymru will gain more seats in the next election. But I don't want to attempt to predict political outcomes. Voters' tendencies will also probably rely heavily on the ability of the local candidates to represent each community's best interests.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because come the election, I'm always aware that, you know, my attraction to national political parties is often very much dampened by the local candidate and their own particular skills as well. And of course, you're electing an MP in the same way that you're electing a government, and it's an interesting thing. But let's stay with Wales, and I just wonder if you could start us off by talking about your farm, Ifan, and how big is it? What sort of land are you on? What are you producing?
We farm 220 acres of upland in Montgomeryshire. The land's all between 12 and 1400 feet above sea level, and we range massively in land types, from areas of peat bogs to areas of rock and scree to actually quite good deep brown soils. We rear sheep for the store market and pedigree Hereford cattle. And all the livestock are completely forage fed.
Fantastic, thanks for that. And I just wanted to check that I heard that correctly. You said forage fed, didn't you, and not forest fed?
That's correct. Sorry.
No. I just wanted to clarify that, because I was imagining the forests on the peat bogs and the screes, and then realised that that wasn't quite accurate. Just talk me through nature, because obviously you're part of the Nature Friendly Farming Network. How's nature doing on your land?
It's actually thriving. We consistently see over 60 species of birds a year. We regularly see brown hare, barn owls, otters, trout. There's 3 species of bats that were recorded here this summer. And the hedges and pastures are also species rich. And I'm hoping that the soil is moving in the same direction.
And just talk to me about your hedges.
We've planted a lot of hedges over the last 25 years, just enough that we can manage to plant them ourselves each year, so they're not all coming to maturity at the same time. And also it takes a very long time for a hedge to grow here. So we've only just started laying them now at round about 20 years old.
But so you've started laying them, but what sort of scope and size are they pre-lay?
They are probably a couple of meters wide, 3 meters wide, and about 4 meters high. But I'm a trainee hedge layer, so I'm not sure if that's the best practice to use.
Yeah, but that's fantastic, isn't it? And it strikes me, you know, I drive around Wales a fair bit, and a lot of the hedges that I see, you know, are relatively neatly trimmed. So those are quite different, and they must be doing something really quite special for the wildlife that you have on the farm.
Yes, well, as Martin alluded to earlier, we attempt to leave certainly a large proportion of the hedges unbrushed. So we only tend to do the sides of the tracks so that we're not damaging vehicles when we drive up and down. The field sides, they're all fenced away from the livestock. So the field sides are fairly well maintained by the sheep, but also mostly the cattle. So anything that grows through a fence, they'll trim them back themselves. And it also adds to the interesting browse that the livestock can eat.
Mm. And when we spoke previously, you talked about the way in which, you know, just sort of thinking about the sheep that you have and the pedigree cattle, that when you first moved onto the farm, when you first started farming at Carreg-y-Bîg, I got that right again. I've not got it written in front of me this time.
You have, yeah.
Carreg-y-Bîg, and that you had a different stocking level, and that actually your productivity improved by the time you'd halved your livestock. Can you just talk me through that? Because we've talked about this on the podcast before, but this is so counterintuitive that I think it is worth talking through every time we come across it.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out there, Finlo, it was our profit which doubled rather than our productivity. So although
I guess that's a definition of productivity, isn't it? And yeah,
exactly. As we almost halved the livestock numbers, the profits almost doubled. A large part of that was due to the expense of bought-in feed, and also by reducing our inputs, we retained a larger proportion of the value of what we were selling at market. We also reduced the pressure on the remaining livestock, allowing for less intervention measures, such as wormers, and very rarely have issues with lameness and things like that anymore.
And when you sort of got that discussion, I guess, around profitability and productivity, and what you've just described there, that's kind of why I'd written down in my notes. I think when we spoke before, you talked about profitability, and I wrote down productivity because it was about the way in which, having reduced the costs that you had on the farm, it wasn't that you were suddenly producing more stuff, but your profitability went up, and that's Martin. How would you define productivity?
Productivity of what as well? Of nature, of food, of water quality. I want our landscape to be producing at the best we can, and I harvest some of that to market and sell. And we're running businesses, so we've got to be focusing on that profitability. And what we've seen across the network and across the country, many farmers who have stepped back on inputs have found margins and profitability and resilience go up, which is counterintuitive because the language from the industry is focus on productivity, on production, and squeeze more out. And actually, realistically, and particularly with our changing climate, rowing back slightly and getting the right balance of productivity to production from our landscape with minimal inputs is the most profitable way we can go forward. And that's what we see many farmers being in a position of.
Yeah, it's that idea that you reduce production, but you increase productivity. And it's that link between the amount of profit that's coming in versus the costs that are there. So that's really interesting to hear that.
And also how much harm we cause in it. Because if you're pushing your landscape harder, water quality may deteriorate, soil health may deteriorate, something else may go wrong, which are unintended consequences that have a cost to our business and a cost to society if our soil's leaving our fields and running down the river, or the water quality is not as good. So we've got to think about that balance of what we do with our landscape as farms and businesses, and who pays for what.
And Ifan, I guess what we're talking about there is sort of moving from an unsustainable level of production to something which is more akin to what we might call sustainable maximum output.
Yeah, exactly. I think sustainability and resilience go hand in hand. You become far more resilient when you're not exposed to external market forces.
Yeah, okay. And if people want to know more about sustainable maximum output, which helps to sort of explain that idea that, as you reduce your costs, or as you reduce your livestock, you're also reducing costs, but you're able to increase the amount of profitability that's there on the farm, as well as delivering those nature outcomes that Martin was referring to. Then if you scroll back in your podcast feed, then you'll find a recent program, I think it's only 4 or 5 back, called The Profitable Farm, which goes into quite a lot of detail on this. And certainly it's been a very popular podcast up to now. Moving on a bit, can we talk about the new sustainable farming scheme in Wales? How are things likely to work out for you with that?
Well, the Welsh government have made a Ready Reckoner available online, which is a very simple tool to use. I think there's only 3 or 4 figures that you need to input into there, and they will throw the figures back that says what the basic payment scheme would be and what the sustainable farming scheme basic payment rate would be.
And you think that you'll be better off as a result of the SFS coming in?
Yeah, almost double.
Okay. What about other farmers? What's the general sense, do you think, about the sustainable farming scheme amongst other farmers? Because, of course, there has been quite a lot of disquiet at different stages over the course of the last couple of years of the development.
There has, certainly. I think there's a lot who still don't fully understand the scheme, but knowledge is improving. In the last couple of weeks to a month, Welsh Government have provided roadshows around the country, and we've got a summary of the sustainable farming scheme on our website as well, and it's quite a heavy document to get through. The Welsh Government document is over 200 pages, but Rhys, the Wales manager, has managed to create a summary of about 15 pages, which is just the main points, and it's quite easy to digest.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I've been going through it myself. Yeah, you mentioned that meeting there, the government was sort of running, explaining things to other farmers. But what was the general feeling in the room, would you say?
I think generally they're quite surprised and hopeful. I get the feeling from talking to others that they may sit out farmers who were unengaged in the past and were intending not to take part in the sustainable farming scheme, may sit out the first year to gauge any problems there might be, any teething problems. But I think I'm really pleased with the scheme. There's a number of stakeholders that have been involved, and we have to remember that this is a compromise. It's not perfect, and I don't think it's a good thing if it's perfect for anyone, really. We all need to compromise a little bit.
Perfection's always a hard thing to achieve, and as you say, it's always there's a unique understanding about it for everybody. But I'm just trying to get a sort of sense of how this works in support terms. So you've obviously got the sustainable farming scheme, and there's the continuation of the basic payment scheme as well. So is there a sense of, you choose which one you want to be part of, or can you be a part of both?
No, there is the basic payment scheme will reduce by 40% next year. So in 2026, a basic payment scheme will be 60%. The following 2027, it'll be 40. 28, it'll be 20% of its current value, and then in 2029 there'll be a complete withdrawal. Now, you don't have to apply for the sustainable farming scheme, but if you stay with the basic payment scheme, that tapering will occur. If you transfer over to the sustainable farming scheme, you cannot then not go back onto the basic payment. Mm-hmm. So that's quite a stipulation that people need to think about.
Mm. So it's kind of an all or nothing, but you can't be part of both. So you can't get some of your money from one, some from the other. It's either you choose the new scheme or you stay with the other until it's worth so little that you really have no choice but to go with the other if you want to get some kind of support or not. When we spoke earlier as well, you mentioned that there was still a bit of a knowledge gap in terms of, woodland and hedges and how they're considered within the new scheme.
Yeah, I think farmers would be surprised or are surprised on how much habitat they already have on farm. And I urge people to do the data confirmation exercise, which actually asks you to confirm the data for the habitats that the Welsh Government hold, and you can alter that to your wishes. Well, to a certain extent, but that exercise will give you the figures of the habitats that are on your farms and the areas of tree cover and things like that. So it's quite a useful exercise to have, because there's a lot of people who don't think that they have much habitat.
I was going to say, you had a story that you told me about a farmer who told you quite confidently that he didn't have any habitat on his land.
I did. I had a farmer, a dairy farmer, who said he didn't have any habitat because he was intensive dairy. So I asked him if he had any ditches or streams, and he said yes, he had quite a few. And I asked him if he had any hedges, and he said he had a couple. And by the end of the 10-minute conversation, I discovered he had a lot of stream sides, riverside to quite a main river in Wales as well, and a large block of deciduous woodland and quite a long meterage of hedges as well. So
potentially he was sort of, if not already at the 10% requirement for habitat, then he wasn't far away.
He would have been very close. And also, I think what surprised a lot of people is that the Welsh Government will also allow temporary habitats. So things like herbal lays will be classed as temporary habitats. And as long as you manage them for nature, to their stipulations, then they can be a way of creating the 20% requirement to get into the scheme.
So let's just go on to the scheme, and in particular around the payments. Now, they've essentially, you start off in the SFS, and there's the universal layer, isn't there, which is where the payments are essentially coming from. And then beyond that, you've got optional layers and collaborative actions as well. Just talk us through that universal layer.
Yeah, well, the universal layer is a baseline payment. So there's a social value payment of £107 a hectare for all eligible land.
And what is eligible land? Because that doesn't seem clear to me in terms of that when I was sort of going through the briefing, because everybody seems to be eligible for it. Does that mean that essentially most land is getting a social value payment?
That's correct. Yeah, it's very similar to the BPS eligibility. So land that was eligible in basic payment scheme is likely to be eligible under the sustainable farming scheme as well.
And that's about just recognizing that farmers have, there is an innate social value to that land being managed.
Yes, exactly. It puts a financial value on everything else that agriculture does, i.e. clean air, clean water, landscape maintenance, outdoor space, visual experiences.
So what's ineligible land?
I believe yards and buildings.
Okay. So it's everything that's green, effectively.
I believe so. Yes. Yeah. Without checking, I'm not 100% sure on that. But
interesting. So I interrupted you because we've got these four different types of payment within the universal layer. We've got the whole farm payment, the social value payment, habitat maintenance, and woodland maintenance. You've mentioned their social value payment. What are the others?
The whole farm payment is a payment to encourage small farms to be part of the sustainable farming scheme. It's a £70 per hectare payment for the first 70 hectares, and from then on it's £2 a hectare. So that would it would be weighted towards the small farms rather than those who are running very large, very extensive holdings, and not possibly needing the financial help of the smaller units.
So those farmers that are really very big are still getting a couple of pounds a hectare within that whole farm payment, because there is still this acreage element, isn't there, within the Welsh scheme, but it's capped, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And they're also getting the social value payment across the whole of it as well. And then there's also a £69 a hectare habitat maintenance payment, and a £62 a hectare woodland maintenance payment.
And those are both on land. So the habitat maintenance payment is on land that is specifically managed as habitat or defined as habitat within the scheme, isn't it? Rather than all the land that's there. So what is habitat land?
That's correct. I won't go through them all, Finlow, because there are, I think, 12 different habitats that Welsh Government have laid out. But it is things such as wood pasture, traditional orchards, salt marsh, heathland. So yeah, there's a number of habitats that would all be eligible. And habitat does not mean that it's fenced off and never seen again. A lot of these are part of the farming system.
It's most sort of active land, isn't it?
Yeah, most of these would be grazed habitats.
Yeah. So you were saying, I think, that around 60% of your farm would be classified as an active habitat.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. Just from the makeup of the plant species in it and the type of soil it's on.
And the woodland maintenance payment, again, presumably that's specifically the land that already has woodland on it, rather than land that's having planting going into it.
Well, I think the planting, when it reaches a certain condition of canopy cover, I think it has to have 20% canopy cover. It then becomes eligible for payment. But actually, the woodland maintenance payment is less than the habitat payment. So that removes the financial incentive for for planting woodlands, just for the sake of a financial decision of buying a farm up and planting the woodland.
But it seems to me generally that the SFS, in terms of this universal layer, in terms of these payments, is really recognising the public good element of farming, and that if you are a farmer who is, farming in a nature-friendly way, you're going to be getting, particularly as you were saying, if you've got a, reasonably small to medium-sized farm, you're going to be getting that whole farm payment, which is, reasonably generous, that sort of first 70 hectares, even though it drops off after that. You've got the social value payment on all green land that you have. If you've got, for example, you've got 60% of your land there that's defined as one type of habitat or another, and you ran through some of those there, then you've got the habitat maintenance payment and the woodland maintenance payment. So that's potentially quite a sizable amount of money, which is probably not inconsistent. And you say, from your perspective, it's more than the basic payment scheme was giving you. So farmers in Wales are a lot better off than farmers in England.
I personally, I think I will be better off. There are a number of people who are looking to plug the gap. So they are not expecting 100% of the basic payment, because actually next year their payment will be 60% anyway. So if SFS could be 80% of their basic payment, that would still be beneficial. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's such a simple calculation as looking at one and the other and saying, well, I'm better off doing that. There's the, as you said, the tapering of the payments. There's also a certain amount of capping that comes into the system as well. So there's zero capping for payments of up to 25,000, and that increases incrementally of 5% for about every 50,000 from then on. Those over 300,000 have 100% capping. So I can't imagine there'd be that many having 300,000 sustainable farming scheme payment there.
Just quickly coming across to you, Martin, I said there that it feels like the smaller farmer within Wales is going to be significantly better off than farmers in England, partly because that acreage element exists, but partly because the payments have been broken down, within that sort of universal payment, the universal sort of elements of that. You're being rewarded for a range of different things that are being delivered across the acreage of your farm. That's very different to England.
Yeah, I think that's the Welsh scheme is very interesting, the way they've set out the value of the social value and keeping small farms going, and that support. While it's not just a payment for a small farm, they have to deliver a range of outcomes for that. So yeah, I think that whole farm approach is a better approach. I've always been disappointed with the England's direction of individual actions getting supported rather than a whole farm approach, and again recognising small family farms are valuable to the rural community and the aspects they deliver. Labour, since they've come into power, have wanted to change some bits for England and cap payments. So it'd be interesting to see where they go to going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's a Labour government that's working in Wales, that's running Wales at the moment. So Labour government now in England, it'd be interesting to see whether they're really watching what's going on in Wales and the degree to which it's a successful rolling out, and how then they might be able to pivot and change the scheme in England if they were of a mind to. Just before we sort of talk more about the generality, the final thing I really want to do, Ifan, is just to talk through what farmers have to do for the money, because in order to be part of the universal payment in the first instance, there are 12 actions as well as then a carbon audit that have to be fulfilled. So just to be eligible, they've got to do a range of different things. Just talk us quickly through that list, would you?
Yes, certainly. I would just say that I don't think a lot of these are very challenging. So they are, things that really should be done on most farms anyway. Yeah. So the first is soil health, which means soil testing on 20% of your improved land, just so that you become informed and can plan for the future of your farm. integrated pest management, which means that you need to complete an annual assessment of plant protection products used and alternative methods to reduce the chemical usage. Then you also will need to benchmark. So that's a complete measuring and monitoring assessment that you could do there's a number of different areas that you could do it in. So you could do it on your lambing percentage or your growth of your livestock. So there's a range of subjects, but they just like people to
benchmarking against yourself or against other farmers?
No, against other farmers, but it's all anonymized.
So it's sort of understanding your own success rate effectively versus your peer group.
Exactly. They're just believing that actually if you're in the bottom 50%, farmers being farmers never want to be there. They want to be at the top. So you will it will incentivize you to make the changes yourself.
Then we've got habitat maintenance, which is something that we've already talked about to an extent. And then you've got continuing professional development.
Yeah, that's right. Which I think there's a few people have panicked about that, but when we've discussed it, it could be something as simple as a farm walk that's eligible, and that's only 6 hours per year. So one farm walk in the summer would qualify you to have completed that, as long as it was an eligible one, or it could be a number of shorter courses.
Yeah, little webinars and maybe even listening to podcasts and things like that with their CPT certified. We've got temporary habitat we've discussed a little bit. What's a designated site management plan?
That's to improve the management of designated sites. So this means that Natural Resources Wales, who control all of these designated sites, must actually approach each landowner and provide a plan. So that is a requirement of the Sustainable Farming Scheme, but it is down to Natural Resources Wales to provide that plan.
Right. Okay. We've got hedgerow management and woodland maintenance. Now, specifically, there are particular ways that you have to manage your hedges to stop them being quite so neatly trimmed, to make them a bit messier.
Yes, they've the Welsh Government have gone for this 3x2 measure. So whether it's 3 meters high and 2 meters wide or vice versa, they're not stipulating which way it needs to be, but they are also asking for incremental cutting. So hedges are not to be cut twice in 2 years, so every other year at the most. And when they are brushed or flailed, they must be left with a 2-inch growth or a 50 mil growth. That's to stop the knuckling. And also apparently the new growth is the part that fruits and flowers better than anywhere else.
Then we've got the tree and hedgerow planting opportunity plan, and that's about just asking farmers to think about where trees and hedgerows could go where they aren't at the moment. And then finally, we've got the historic environment and animal health and welfare. Just quickly talk us through those two.
Yeah, the historic environment, it's very simple, of just protecting the features and heritage that we have. So it's not asking for any major works. It's asking if there's a couple of slates blow off an old building to put them back.
And presumably, if you've got a standing stone or a henge in your field, then you treat them with care.
Yeah, don't go and dig it up and don't plough up to it. Just generally don't cause damage. I think is the guidelines. And then the health and welfare is to work with your vet and monitor and continuous improvement in your livestock health and welfare, which there's a lot of people doing already with farm insurance schemes and organic schemes and things like that anyway.
So it's really interesting because what they've done there is essentially to sort of break down, what they consider good sustainable, nature-friendly farming to be. They've sort of allocated it into 12, as I say, plus the carbon audit there. Presumably, once they've got those baselines in place, then there will be, sort of decisions taken to tweak those to perhaps make things that are slightly more onerous, less onerous, but also to tighten things up so that the standards become slightly higher as you go forward. So it's really interesting, and it's actually not dissimilar from the Scottish scheme as well, where there is this requirement to essentially baseline your farm across a whole range of different categories. So that's what's needed for the universal layer. There are also then payments for optional actions, which we won't go into today, but as we've said, they're in this fantastic briefing that Rhys has done for the Nature Friendly Farming Network, and then collaborative actions, which are looking at landscape scale work. Thanks so much for that, Ifan. Really appreciate it. And Martin, just sort of final thoughts, really. What do you make of the Welsh scheme there?
For me, I quite like it. Many of our core costs as farmers is maintaining the environment and the natural capital, natural landscape. So there's payments for that. So that should help the business. That professional development and thinking about your farm as a business and how you skill yourself and improve your product, your animal welfare and your production. That's a good value. So it's clearly set out as a scheme of adding to your business, adding to the landscape, and public money. Using public money to drive good outcomes for public value. I'll be really interested to see how it sort of evolves over the next year or two, and how farmers in Wales really sort of get on board with it.
Yeah, fantastic. And the thing that also really sort of interests me with Wales is not only the scheme, because obviously the scheme is there now, it's been set out. So it's a case of just it being applied, farmers applying for it, and then seeing how that goes, but also how that then sits alongside nature markets, natural capital markets, because I think that there is more skepticism within government and within some of those statutory bodies like Natural Resources Wales. There's less of an active market in natural capital within Wales at the moment than there is in England or even in Scotland, where, there isn't as much going on as England, particularly because of biodiversity net gain in England. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
Very much, and in Northern Ireland. But what we do need is a standard set of matrix for the market to work across the UK. Because what will happen is the money will go where there's the easiest matrix to measure. So actually what we need all UK governments to do in order to vote is what is the standard measure for the market to work? And then you can tweak it to your own devolved nation. But if you want to make a market work, it needs reliability, a market to work in, and longevity to invest in.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because there, as you say, we've got farming and land use there, sort of devolved activities. And so very different schemes in Wales and Northern Ireland, England and Scotland, but natural capital, because they're selling into nationwide markets and even global markets. There is this real need for governments to sit down, with each other and put aside some of their differences and just come up with some sensible ways of scaling and accelerating that market delivery. Well, look, that's all we've got time for. We're going to be back next month thinking about December and Christmas, all the things that Martin's involved in around Christmas, instant neots, and continuing our tour of the Nature Friendly Farming Network in the UK. I'd really like to thank Ifan for joining us. It's been fascinating to hear about the Welsh scheme and to have that conversation about social media as well, hear a bit about the way that you've been farming there in Wales as well, Ifan. And of course, thank you to Martin for joining us. As ever, if you've enjoyed listening, please come back and listen to more. Tell your friends, like us, review us, and share our links. Farmgate is now the world's highest ranking food security podcast, and Farmgate Leaders and Wheat from the Chaff are also available on the Farmgate channel if you just scroll back in your podcast feed. Farmgate is part of 8.9.com, the land use news channel, which is sponsored by First Milk, Pelican Ag, Rural Solutions, the Usk Catchment Partnership, Agrolo, and individual donors. So it's goodbye from Martin and from Ifan.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
And I've been Finlo Costain. Bye for now.